This episode is brought to you by Energize Colorado. Energize Colorado is a nonprofit that provides resources and advising to small businesses across the state. Energize Colorado is here to create a more resilient foundation for the state's small business ecosystem. They provide the resources necessary for small businesses to flourish. Low interest loans to energize your small business with Energize Colorado. Learn more at energizecolorado.com. Today on CityCast Denver. After months of mayoral madness, the people of Denver have elected Mike Johnston as our next mayor. Me and producer Paul Karolyi have got analysis and a full breakdown of what happened on Tuesday night. Today is Wednesday, June 7th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about.
Here we are. We are recording here at 10:15 p.m. 10:28 p.m. on Election Day in CityCast Denver's election headquarters, a.k.a. Bree's living room. We just got an update from Denver elections, probably the second to last one of the night, but more importantly, Kelly Brough has conceded. So it looks like Mike Johnston will be Denver's next mayor. Bree.
Yeah.
What are your first impressions?
I mean, this was kind of a lackluster situation. I wanted to read a couple tweets that I found funny about this. David Sirota, noted huge Democrat out of Colorado, has done a lot of he's worked on campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a progressive voice. He said
speechwriter for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I was going to say most notably. But also, just journalist. He's a voice I look to just out of curiosity as to what he was thinking about this. He said, this year's Denver mayoral runoff was the first time in my life that I sent in my ballot with a deliberate undervote, which means he did not vote. Mm-hmm. It was the most nauseating and oligarchic race I've ever seen. It wasn't an election. It was an auction. And so I took Monty Brewster's advice. And then he has a screen grab of Richard Pryor from the movie Brewster's Millions. And it's just Richard Pryor standing in front of a sign that says none of the above. Interesting. Yeah.
What a great movie.
Perfect take.
But what do you think he's getting at there?
I think he's getting at what a lot of folks that were initially really excited about this election felt after we got to the runoff stage, where you and I were talking earlier, like the excitement of the 17 candidates mm-hmm. and the future, the unknowing future.
There were so many different visions of the future available. It was like, oh, this candidate has this very specific thing that resonates with me. At least that's how I felt. Like, I was just so frustrated when people were like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed by the amount of candidates. It's like, no, you got all these choices, all these different, flavors of possible futures of your lives. Like, this is exciting. And so I don't know. That's what I'm taking from Sirota's comments here.
Yeah, I don't know if I fully agree with the strength of that take, but I will say I was not super stoked. To mm-hmm. be honest, I didn't fill out or turn in my ballot until today. Mm-hmm. And then I went to my usual ballot drop-off, as I always do, at Barnum Rec Center. And who did I run into? Clerk and recorder, friend of the show, Paul Lopez. And he looked about as exhausted as I felt about it. So
he and his team seem to have crushed it as usual.
Yes, they were in there doing the work that makes this whole thing happen. So, shout out to the clerk and recorder's office. We appreciate the work they do. Okay, Adam Caton Holland, also a great take. Comedian here in Denver. I grew up reading his column, What's So Funny, in Westward. But he said, imagine being excited about this Denver mayoral election. What must that be like? And I feel like that's a little bit more how I feel. Yeah. Is like, for people like us who watch this day in and day out, we were not super pumped. We were pumped to get together, hang out, eat Chinese food, and talk about everything else but the election, if you didn't notice tonight, Paul. Uh-huh. And I think Adam's onto something, is like, the excitement was not there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but a lot of people are excited here, though. Mike Johnston had a lot of supporters, and we should say, this is Mayor-elect Mike Johnston. That's the first time we can say that. That means something. How does that feel? How does that hit your ear?
I'm excited regardless because it's someone new. We've been talking about this again behind the scenes on this show quite a bit, is the narrative. What is the narrative of Denver? What's the narrative for the next era of Denver that we are currently living in? And I am excited for that notion.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mike has some interesting ideas, like we've talked about with him on the show around housing, a big thing for him. Arguably one of the biggest points in this election, though I don't think it panned out or played out the way I thought it was going to as an issue.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm excited for something new. And whoever it was going to be, it's going to be someone who's not Hancock. So those of us who have maybe been very critical of Hancock have a chance to start over, clean slate, and say, what do we want to hold this mayor accountable for? What do we want to see them do? What do we want to see Mike do differently? Because he's got a chance to do something different.
Right. And that's our job now. I mean, he's made some big promises on the campaign trail. A lot of promises about, where he's going to get the money for all these big plans that he laid out there. The most high profile claim I think he made was he said he's going to end unsanctioned homelessness in his first term.
Yeah.
Now he's got to actually do that. And that's going to be hard.
I think so much about Hickenlooper's 10-year plan to end homelessness, Denver's Road Home. And it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that promise. I agree. You and I and our fellow folks in the media, as well as constituents, get to hold Mike to that.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely will be asking him about that. I'm sure you will hear from him in the next couple of months on this show, no doubt.
Well, if this is the first time that you're tuning in to this election and you haven't heard the name Mike Johnston before, which I assume is some people, that's totally a fine way to live your life. Mike Johnston is a former candidate for governor, for senator. He lost those races. He was a teacher, a school principal. That's kind of where he made his first mark. He got a lot of national attention. Obama famously visited his school here in Denver. He was the CEO of Gary Community Ventures, where he helped get Prop 123, a lot of affordable housing money from the state passed. He was a graduate of Yale and Harvard. His family has a lot of money from their boutique hotel in Vail, which we were looking at the listings for online earlier.
Can we get a press pass to stay at that hotel?
I think it's our obligation as journalists to go and stay at that fancy hotel in Vail.
Stay at that. And I don't ski, so I'm just going to be in that room the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And also of this big diverse field, he is a white man.
And you know what's so interesting about this, Paul, to me is I'm thinking about the big criticisms of this race, which were money, right? Mm-hmm. Kelly raised a lot of money. Mike raised a lot of money. And there was a lot of questions around, why is Mike getting money from outside? Who cares about Denver that much? But when it came down to these other 15 candidates that had been on the ballot with them, when it shook out, majority of the folks that were making endorsements endorsed Mike. Mm-hmm. And these are leaders of color in our community. These are people that have been deeply rooted in our community. And I think it's an accountability thing. I hope that they're going to hold him accountable, but I also wonder who we're going to see appointed in the next couple of months. Yeah,
I mean, there was so much talk about backroom deals and rumors and anonymous sources in here, and all. I mean, we can all. I mean, I hope we can
speculate all we want, but
that.
But politics. That's politics, Paul.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Like, not to undermine those criticisms, but like, if you dig into anybody's appointees, there's somebody that knows somebody.
For sure.
But I'm thinking about Annie and Tafoya, Lisa Calderon, Terrence Roberts, like who, at least the biggest one, honestly, to me, Leslie Herod, she really stepped out and supported him. So I'm curious who we're going to see working alongside this mayor. I would be excited for all of those folks to have a hand in whatever the next stage of Denver looks like, but we'll see. But Paul, where do the votes stand right now?
Well, right now, I mean, it's important to say that this is not official. The official results aren't going to be in until June 20th. But what we do know for sure is that of the 131,969 votes that have been counted, 54% went for Johnston, 46% went for Brough. Now, turnout-wise, in 2019, this is just a benchmark. This is the runoff between Michael Hancock and Jamie Gillis. There was about a 39% turnout. So far, as of tonight, we have 160,914 ballots, or around 36% of ballots sent back. So comparable, I would say. Maybe a little lower, but it's also still early. We'll see. We'll see by June 20th.
Always interesting to look at those races too, just because at that point we were looking at an incumbent and a newcomer to politics. And at this point we are looking at someone who has been in politics and a newcomer to politics. So, okay, well, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about those council races. This episode is brought to you by the Regional Air Quality Council. While we sometimes deal with wildfire smoke, did you know that the Front Range's biggest air quality issue is actually invisible? Created from pollutants like car exhaust that react in sunlight, ground-level ozone is a leading cause of respiratory problems. If you go out for an evening jog after a beautiful sunny day and feel that tightness in your chest, that could well be ground-level ozone. Besides feeling really out of breath, long-term exposure to high levels of ozone is linked to respiratory illnesses. But there is something you can do. Sign up for ground level ozone alerts to be aware of bad air days. To receive air quality alerts on your phone, text Better Air CO to 21000. You can also sign up online for emails at simplestepsbetterair.org. You'll also receive tips on how to improve air quality, so high ozone days happen less often. To stay in the know about bad air quality days and learn more, visit simplestepsbetterair.org. This episode is brought to you by Bad Boy Boards. Based right here in Denver, Bad Boy Boards takes raw hardwood and turns it into world-class cutting boards, charcuterie boards, chess boards, and more. It's a local brand with high quality and great prices, which is great because home chefs like me don't have to settle for anything less than simple elegance in world-class quality hardwood boards and dust covers. They also make gifting customizable and super easy. Oh, and this is super cool. If you stop by Bad Boy Boards, you can watch a live stream of the manufacturing floor so you can actually see your cutting board being made. Seriously, it's so cool. It's like if Willy Wonka made cutting boards. Learn more and order your own individually designed, constructed, and finished board at badboyboards.com. Okay, and we're back. One thing we know, what time is it, Paul? It's
10:39 p.m.
10:39 p.m. This is what we know so far. We know that Kelly Brough has conceded. Mike Johnston is the next mayor of Denver. But we also had these council race runoffs that we talked about being potentially a big shakeup. There was this slate of progressive candidates that were running sort of as a coalition. I think it was 5 candidates on that slate. We ended up with 3 of them. Yeah, we ended up with 3 of them in these runoffs. But let's talk about, okay, let's just start with the first race. Let's start with District, or should we, sorry. District 7 went to Flora Alvidrez.
Yes.
We already knew that.
Her challenger decided to take himself out of the race, so we knew that Flora was going to win.
She was on the ballot, and she got a couple thousand votes anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But next up was District 8. And let's talk about what's going on in District 8.
All right, so District 8 was the race between Brad Revere and Chantel Lewis. And I would say this one is the closest race of the night. Mm-hmm. So of the 11,656 votes counted so far, Revere is sitting at 50.33% and Lewis is 49.6%. So that's less than 100 votes. I think we're not only going to be counting this for the rest of the week, but we're going to be talking about this one for another couple weeks.
You think so?
Yeah,
I mean, so. I guess with something that close, if we're looking at right now, it's less than 100 vote difference. It is going to be really, really down to the wire.
Mm-hmm.
This race, I have to say, in covering it, these candidates were offering very similar prospects.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of things they wanted to work on. They were both really big about affordable housing. They were both talking about transit issues. They were both talking about equity. So I could see voters in District 8 having a little bit of a struggle, like both of these seem pretty great. The thing with Chantel to me is that she was part of this sort of progressive slate of candidates. But I will be honest, looking at all of the candidates that were on that slate, she was the most pragmatic to me and sort of more of a behind the scenes person than she's not a center stage person to me in terms of like, she doesn't need the spotlight. She wants to go to work for the city.
She is coming off of a term on the RTD board.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a more thankless elected position in this city? Like, what a tedious work. And she was doing it for years. So I totally agree. And then on the other hand, Rivera, he's the establishment guy. He had the endorsement of the current council person for this seat, Chris Herndon. So I think, they may have had very similar policies in the end, but that definitely is the distinction between them. Is he's the establishment guy, she is the progressive, and we'll see who pulls out.
That's a very thank you for making that distinction, because policies aside, when we talk about endorsements, that can mean a lot for some voters. Okay, District 9. The most watched race to me in this whole runoff election, hands down. District 9, what's happening there, Paul?
District 9 turned out to be a bit of a lopsided one.
Yeah.
So this one was super close. It was between the incumbent Candy Setabaca and the challenger Darrell Watson. Setabaca has been a firebrand, progressive voice on council. We've called her the lone no vote for how often she splits with the other 12 council people. And as a result, she had a lot of these more powerful establishment figures in the city just waiting to support somebody against her in this race. And that's exactly what happened. Darrell Watson was a huge fundraiser, and he won a ton of votes. As of now, he's got 63% of the votes counted. He's already declared victory. He declared victory earlier in the night. This is the end of Candy Setabaca's time on city council.
The thing I found interesting about this was Darrell Watson lost a city council bid in 2007. So he was not totally unfamiliar to some voters, though that was a long time ago. But Candy was the incumbent. And like you said, she's progressive, firebrand. That's what got her elected, right? She unseated an incumbent herself. Albus Brooks was who she unseated was similar to Darrell in that he's the establishment guy. He was I would say he was blamed a lot for a lot of the development and change in his district and how the built environment physically looked. Whether that criticism was fair or not is up to, I don't know. It's something, but
it's up to the listener
to decide. But I just find it interesting that she was the incumbent. She had unseated an incumbent. That district, to me, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. You don't know. I mean, the voter base really it's divided, and that's not a lot, but the vote count versus like the mayor's election is like not as many votes, that's hundreds of thousands. This can come down to a couple hundred votes, but that's not how this shook out at all.
Yeah.
Darrell is.
And when people talk about change in this city, this is a district where that change has been felt acutely. I mean, there's giant apartment high rises where there used to be, tiny bungalows. They're like small historic communities, Black communities in particular. And I think we're seeing the results of that change here tonight. Also interesting to me, Darrell was endorsed by Albus Brooks, the former council member. Also, council members who sat with Candy on council, Debbie Ortega and Chris Herndon, also endorsed him. So, I don't know. That was a real race. It was a huge.
That was an act.
We were so close in the first round, and now so not close.
Speaking of that, Paul, why do you think that happened? What happened between this race and the runoff for District 9?
Well, definitely going into this race, there was this clear sense that there was going to be a lot of the establishment looking for a challenger to Setabaca, and it was a three-way race in the first round because there was this other candidate, Quan Atlas, who is aligned with Mayor Hancock, who's the editor of this very micro community newspaper, the 5 Points Atlas. So it seemed like maybe he was the guy, but now that he's out of the picture, I think all of those Quan Atlas votes went to Darrell Watson.
Thank you. I'm glad we pointed that out, because at first when I saw these numbers, I was like, where did all these Darrell Watson voters come from that were not in the first race? But they migrated over from that third candidate. And then finally, District 10, Also, we'll talk about the numbers, but we're not going to call this one yet because nobody has.
Yeah, this one's a little bit too close. So this was the race between the incumbent Chris Hines against the challenger Shannon Hoffman, who was on this slate of progressives that we've been talking about all campaign cycle long. And Hines was the clear leader after the first round a couple of months ago, and it does look like he is ahead tonight with 57% of the votes counted in his favor. But I agree. I think this one is too close to call. I mean, maybe we'll see later in the week. Maybe we'll see later tonight.
Yeah. I have to say this race was interesting to me because I think Shannon was a first timer. She's never run for office before. And I think sometimes what happens in a cool way is that your challenger pushes you to campaign a little harder. And I think I saw that a little bit here in District 10. Like she was really out there in the community talking to people. And I think it pushed Hines to do the same. And maybe it just was reminding them who he was, because often I think when you're doing a really good job, sometimes people don't know who you are because nothing's wrong in your neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And he is one of those council people where he's not like out making a stink. He's not like making a big show on social media. He's like kind of just show up and do the work kind of guy. That's the impression I've got, at least.
Totally. And I thought it was, I think about my council person, Jamie Torres, who didn't have to run or do anything because she's so popular, and she's like kind of the opposite, like the person that's out there in the community talking to people. But I think you're right. I don't think it's that Chris wasn't out there doing that. It was just like, I think I saw him a little bit more because of this race, because of the runoff in particular. And I like to see that, because to me, that says somebody really takes this job seriously. They're not taking their voters for granted, and they're interested in staying on and sticking with this job. It's a tough job.
Yeah. Yeah. Bree, you mentioned we had Chinese food earlier. You up for something fun to finish the show?
Sure, of course.
All right. Well,
I thought saved your fortune cookie?
I thought since we're going to have a new mayor, we're going to have this new city council, I might read us a special fortune for the occasion.
Oh, I should have saved my son's fortune. Was way better than mine. I don't know what I did with it.
Okay, I got kind of torn off into the plastic a little bit. This is going to be a weird fortune.
Oh, no.
Devotion is worth the effort this time.
I don't like that, Paul. When do we use the word devotion? Not when we're talking politics and people that represent us.
Oh, boy.
Oh. As of election night here, we for sure have a new mayor, Mike Johnston. Congrats, Mike.
Yeah, and he'll be inaugurated July 17th. So we'll obviously be talking about this in the intervening weeks, what this means for the city, what this means for us, what this means for you. Let us know what you think.
Yes.
I would love to hear what people think about the results here. So leave us one last voicemail or send us a text at the Mayoral Madness hotline. That number is 720-500-5418. Again, the Mayoral Madness hotline is open for a limited time only. We're closing it soon. The number is 720-500-5418.
Help us close this chapter on Mayoral Madness. You guys really stuck it out with us this whole time because we did a lot of coverage, and we would love to hear what you thought and how you feel about what this new version of Denver means to you.
The Johnston era. The Johnston years.
Era. Yeah.
The belt buckle years.
The belt buckle years.
I'll tell that story sometime.
Next
time.
Well, Paul, we should retire to our respective homes here soon and go to bed. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell the concierge at Christiana Lodge about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter, Hey Denver, by texting Denver to 66866. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya!
I think that's the one.
Damn it!
I think that's the one.
Oh, dang it! No.
Mine said, "Whoops, wrong cookie."
Hold on. I'm not trying to change it. There is nothing permanent except change.
I mean,
So
They're all kind of the same at the end of the day.
Even the toughest of days have bright spots. Just do your best. I feel like that's the one.
I like that one.
Just do your best.